Tonight on Free Minds TV, we'll be discussing the Federal Reserve Bank's plans to monitor discussions in social media. We'll also be talking about the relationship that medical marijuana dispensaries may or may not have to crime in California, OnStar monitoring your location to earn a buck, and urban gardening being cracked down on once again. That coming up tonight on Free Minds TV.
Thank you for tuning in to a brand new episode of Free Minds TV, where we challenge you, the viewer, to think outside the box. This is the 223rd episode, or season 6, episode 34 or 35. I'm not sure. Anyways, it's getting up there that we've recorded, and it's Toby here with you.
And Nick.
We've got a lot to talk about. We are going to be getting into news about the Fed, as well as some medical marijuana news from California, some new data coming out, and it's how it relates to crime, and as well as some other news. But first, I wanted to get into urban gardening. We've talked about this many times. According to this blog, they're citing hundreds or thousands of cases of people having a backyard garden being cracked down upon and shut down by various cities, ordinances, and such.
Pretty unfortunate when you have people simply trying to grow their own food and they're facing jail time for it.
Many of my neighbors have little gardens of tomatoes.
There's a lot of these in Keene.
I think they look very nice, but some people think that they are an eyesore and a nuisance. This happens all over the place. It's kind of like those lemonade stories we talk about, where the police crack down on little kids selling lemonade. This is a similar type of theme, where you can find many stories like this, where city councils or city ordinances, code enforcement officers go around shutting down people's backyard gardens. This one coming from Memphis, Tennessee, where a Memphis math teacher, along with several of his students from his neighborhood, tended to an urban garden, kept bees, and made products of biofuel and soap with the byproducts of biofuel production. The teacher does this on his own time, on his own property, after spending all day teaching. Now, some people might say he should get some kind of an award for this, for being a good teacher, taking his own time to help students after school, but no, the city of Memphis says not otherwise. In Memphis, Tennessee, this teacher is a public nuisance, and he's been ordered to disseminate his garden. Ralph Ely High School teacher Adam Guru, who tends the garden with 3 of his students as well as a couple of neighbors, was cited by the city for being the public nuisance, specifically violating City Ordinance 4838, which says, quote, "It shall be unlawful for any owner of personal property to fail or refuse to comply with the orders of the manager of housing and code enforcement to remove from the premises abandoned vehicles, appliances, vehicle parts, and or any other piece or pieces of personal property if such personal property is dangerous to the public health, safety, or welfare, or creates an unsightly condition upon such property tending to reduce the value thereof, or is a nuisance, or invites plundering," I like that one, that's my favorite, "or promotes an urban blight and the deterioration in the community, or creates a fire hazard, or violates zoning regulations of the city."
The provision about urban blight and deterioration, I think, is pretty interesting, because really what urban gardening is doing is really trying to rectify and address urban blight and deterioration. I mean, believe it or not, when you're living in an urban setting, it's not actually a very nice state of affairs when everything is covered with concrete or shortly mowed grass. That's not a very natural environment. It's not an environment, I mean, they've done studies on what environments actually do to the way human beings feel, the way your brain actually works. And having settings like parks, like gardens, actually does have an effect on the cognitive functions of your brain. It basically helps you reset faster if you have some exposure to nature. So I don't know what they're talking about with urban blight. To me, that seems like abandoned cars and burned out buildings.
Well, that's in the ordinance as well, but it also applies to gardens, Nick. Some people like asphalt cities. In fact, it looks like Mr. Guru also violated City Code 4887, which says, quote, All exterior property areas shall be maintained in a clean and sanitary condition, free from any accumulation of rubbish or garbage. And apparently that includes dirt and life, which was in the garden. Can't have dirt and life out there. Gotta make either clean cut grass, all green, or pave it over.
Yeah, I think that's, I mean, I think unfortunately what you're seeing here is the attitude that a lot of Americans and a lot of people in developed countries in general have towards nature, where our food comes from, the thing that keeps us alive. Now you're seeing it codified into laws where they're basically, you know, places where people live are not places where people grow food. We do that somewhere hundreds of miles away in these big sterile monocultures, and we use petroleum to do it, and then we truck it to the grocery store, and that's where it's appropriate to get your food. If you don't get your food at the grocery store, you're some kind of weirdo.
It's actually becoming more and more like beneficial to grow one's own food. With the prices at the grocery store, with worldwide food shortages, I know that here in the United States, most of us can get 3 healthy squares a day. In fact, much more than that. There's definitely a weight problem here, but having gardens actually promotes healthy eating. It reduces costs at the grocery store. And well, it also creates a sustainable future, something we want to be encouraging students, kids to be doing. Instead, when a teacher does this on his own time, not even on school time, he's being punished for it in order to cease and desist.
Yeah, and this year going forward especially, I mean, we saw a really bad drought in Texas, and I've read stories that that's going to push up beef prices along with some other food prices because farmers had to sell their cows. They couldn't feed them. We saw terrible flooding in some parts of the Midwest. I know the Dakotas got hit really hard by spring floods that went well into the summer, and that resulted in a lot of crop loss or crops not getting started. So, you know, we'll probably see even higher food prices than the already elevated food prices that we're used to right now as we go into the fall and the winter. So, to me, it just makes sense to have a food system that you're not going to be able to feed yourself entirely from an urban garden. It'd be really hard to feed yourself entirely even if you had farmland, but it makes sense to kind of produce some of that food that you can produce if you want to. I think it makes a lot of sense to produce it locally, either grow it yourself or support somebody who grows it locally, instead of depending entirely upon a very delicate and very complex supply chain and a global food market that, you know, it really does, it's a foreign concept to us, Toby, but there is such a thing as, you know, a bad year. Crop failures used to kill people. And they
still do, just not here in the United States.
Not here in the U.S., but, you know, they still have the potential to make an impact, especially on people who don't have a lot of income.
Yeah, and you know what? I also want to point out that teenagers and kids doing gardening after school is a lot healthier than some of the alternatives. Even if they're not getting into trouble, it's a lot healthier than sitting inside and playing video games and watching TV, not to mention some of the worst things that you can use your imagination to let go wild. So, you know, I think that this is a pity, and like I said, this is not an isolated incident. Hundreds and thousands of these cases come up every single year in the United States, and they're only getting more prevalent, not less prevalent. In fact, the United States federal government recently passed something along the lines of the Food Safety Act, which actually could make such gardens illegal on a federal level as well. They haven't done that yet, but they have the potential
Thankfully,
to.
they amended out some of the worst provisions of that, but there are still some troubling ones in the legislation as it's been passed.
Makes it so they can crack down if they want to,
right, but I mean, I guess the fundamental issue with these stories, too, is you should just be able to grow food on your land.
Yeah, it's yours, right?
Right. I mean, I can see if you decide to have a pig farm in the suburbs, and, you know, it's the noxious smells and things.
Well, that's where you might be running into some of the more.
That's where you might be
that's what I might see a public nuisance.
Right. You might actually be offending against somebody else's property rights.
Yes.
Right, because pigs smell, well, pigs leaving
Nobody
smell
wants
terrible.
to live next, well, not many people want to live next to a pig farm.
It's an acquired taste, I guess. But
I
can see
I
that.
grew up with pigs. My mom made my dad get rid of them
But
all.
growing vegetables just because somebody wants to look at sterile, shortly mowed grass, that's absurd.
Yeah.
And it's really, I think it's somewhat shameful to look. I mean, if you look on a garden, I realize there are bad ways to keep them up, but if you look on a fairly well-maintained garden as something bad or ugly, what's wrong with you?
Oh.
So there's something wrong with you
Well,
because
it's a reflection of society.
Right. Apparently you've just forgotten that That's what keeps us alive.
Well, it's not just one person. It's to the point where they are passing city ordinances. So it's not just one person with an issue here. There's enough people that think that gardens are a public nuisance that they are enacting these city ordinances, not just in Memphis, Tennessee, but all over the United States. So, and they're only becoming more prevalent, not less prevalent. But on to more, well, that's scary in itself, but something that's a little bit more Big Brother-esque is the solution. Can you tell me about it?
All right. Now, full disclosure here, the article that I'm reading this from came from Right Side News, which is definitely, I wouldn't call them an objective source of information.
No.
We're not an objective show either.
Nope.
And we tell you, we don't really do, I mean, we try to make sure that the information we're presenting is factual because it doesn't reflect very well on us if we tell you stuff that's not true. But we don't have a fact-checking
We're
team.
very biased
and we're
as well.
not journalists. We're not objective.
It's a commentary show.
We don't play
not
journalists
a
on
news show.
TV. But they do link directly to the source information in this article and a whole bunch of other blogs. So they do provide some of their own sourcing here. And they're stating here that the Federal Reserve Bank, specifically the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, plans to identify key bloggers and monitor billions of conversations about the Fed on Facebook, Twitter, forums, and blogs. As first reported on Zero Hedge, the Federal Reserve Bank of New York has issued a request for proposal, which you can, I mean, this story will be in the show prep for the show, and you can go in here and read the original request for proposal, to suppliers who may be interested in participating in the development of a sentiment analysis and social media monitoring solution. Sounds a little creepy. So here's some of the language of the proposal here. The intent is to establish a fair and equitable partnership with a market leader who will gather data from various social media outlets and news sources and provide applicable reporting to the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. This request for proposal was created in an effort to support the Federal Reserve Bank of New York's social media listening platforms initiative. And they get into some of the other language
What's
here.
that mean, Nick?
It means they're going to work with some kind of an IT firm or a technical firm. I don't know whether they're going to create their own software or exactly. I imagine the
Software exists already.
Right, but they're looking for a corporate partner to monitor the discussions. If you're somebody who talks about the Federal Reserve on YouTube, on Facebook, on Twitter, any of the social media outlets, basically places where you as an average person or as an alternative journalist can produce news or talk about your opinions, they're going to try to monitor all of these conversations in real time. That's in the language that they're using here in this proposal. And identify the sentiment as positive, negative, or neutral. Identify and reach out to key bloggers and influencers. That sounds lovely. Is that us?
I definitely think I think this article might be bait for us. We might.
I think
talk
this is
about
their
this in
beta
real
test.
time, where we're being.
Oh, I
caught
think
up
this
in
is
it.
the beta test. As soon as how quickly can they catch it after it's uploaded?
So
No,
wait,
but-
does that mean they're going to reach out to
no
us?
joke. I don't know. But
Or should we be expecting
basically,
an email from the Fed?
This is very eerie, and they talk about some of the other points. The solution should provide.
That's the creepiest part.
The
is its
solution
name.
should provide an alerting mechanism that automatically sends out reports or notifications based on a predefined trigger. Now, I don't think the intention here, certainly the most paranoid or the most negative viewpoint you could take of this story is that they're going to try to round up or shut up the alternative press that talks about this.
I doubt that.
And I have my
yet
doubts about
anyways.
that at this point.
Just put you on a
Well,
list. They like lists.
I think what they're trying to do here is, well, maybe, yeah, they probably will put you on a list.
Lists are awesome for governments.
And what they're trying to do here is manage. In some ways, this is good news because what they're trying to do here is be able to have a tool to better manage their PR strategy. The Federal Reserve needs a PR strategy now. That's something new. That's something we haven't seen in decades, where the central bank actually seriously has to worry about opposition, not only to its policies at the time, but to its structure, to the way the organization's laid out, and in many circles, to its very existence. And I'm somebody who'd like to see the Federal Reserve go away entirely. I know that's not an entirely mainstream viewpoint yet, but there's certainly a pretty well-supported push among people who are aware of these issues to make the Federal Reserve more transparent, to do a full audit of the Federal Reserve. That's certainly something I don't think they want us to see. They've already voluntarily released some of that information about who got some of the rescue package funds. A lot of really rich people, a lot of really, well, banks that had engaged in some really disreputable practices made a lot of people angry, but they had to release that information because the pressure was building to the point where they were worried that they'd have to be transparent all the time, which they should be. But they figured, well, we'll just feed them a little bit of information and pretend we're being transparent now, and this will go away. I think the Federal Reserve is under a lot of pressure, and I think a move to get back to honest money is gaining enough steam that they might not really think they're threatened yet, but they are playing defense, and that's what they're doing here.
Nick, I'm sorry. All I can keep thinking about are key words that you're saying that I'm sure are embedded in the software, such as abolish, Federal Reserve, honest money. You know how many keywords you were just picked up and it's analyzing in real time right now, saying that negative, I think, is the flag that it would send out for you and put you on that little list yet again. I wonder how many check marks next to negative you have right now.
I don't know. But certainly that's the fact
that's what the software is designed to do, right?
But the fact that they care what I'm saying on YouTube. Remember, they're talking about the Fed already would probably have a pretty easy time of reaching out, like any large institution or government body would, reaching out to mainstream media. But this article points out, I don't know where they got this statistic, some statistic about Americans now get 43% of their primary news source for news and current events is the internet. That's 43% of Americans. That's way more than used to get their news from those sources. Pretty soon it's going to be a majority of Americans get their news from the web, and not just from CNN's website or BBC's website, but from bloggers and the alternative press online. That is something that I think makes governments and people in positions of power very afraid, because now they can't control information in the same way that they have. And with all that free press stuff you heard about, in high school when you learned about the kind of, the freedoms of the press that we have, I don't really think it works that way, Toby.
Well,
there's certainly,
it's all driven by money. It's driven by sponsorships.
The big corporate news
whether
is driven by
money
influence.
and sponsorship, influence, and whether you want to go down the conspiracy trail of saying big government controls this stuff, or you want to just go down the let's follow the money trail. Big sponsors don't put their money behind people who shake up the system. They put their money behind people who go down the straight and narrow path, so to speak. So it makes sense either way you want to go down the rabbit hole or to go down the money trail, that the big media just really prints the press releases from the Federal Reserve or from the White House or from the government for the most part. They might put their own little spin on it, but for the most part it's not any kind of journalism going on. It's just reprinting press releases from one source or the other. They're not actually doing all that much digging now anymore. But now with the internet, you're right, Nick, there are people with different voices who are doing this for free. I mean, we're not making money off this show.
No, the
yet
show's
we're
never
doing it anyways.
So the show's never made money over any period of time.
So there's no sponsors that we're worried about losing. I mean, if we anger some viewers, they might not send us any money, but that's not the driving force for this show.
And we are limited in how many people we reach, but we do reach a lot more people than we ever could have before with the web. We're just able to get that message out there, and we're not just on in Keene. We're on other public access stations, and we're on many of them because they can get it through the web.
The web, yeah, we're on.
Or they find the show through the web. We don't find them.
Right, we're on in many states. I think like 10 or 15 states across the United States, across the U.S. here. California to Florida to Georgia to Michigan, all over New England. We're on that because of the internet, because we upload our show to Peg Media, and Peg Media different stations download us. So that's, once again, the internet. It's not just the YouTube views or the other sites that pick us up.
Yeah, but I mean, I think that the internet and the way we communicate now in real time, across the globe. I can talk to somebody in Argentina or in Thailand or in England in real time about what's happening, and we can share opinions. That's something that is I think is a real threat to people in positions of power, whether you're talking about central bankers, politicians, or the politically connected business interests that drive a lot of government policy. You're talking about a huge threat, and it's something that's beyond their control. They really don't like things that they can't at least kind of manipulate and steer one way or the other.
Yep. Well, Nick, it's not just big governments that are tracking people, their every movement. It's also private business. And this is one of the reasons why I'm not all for just, some people are like, the government, what's holding people back in their freedoms and everything. Well, no, it's not just government. It's money in general. I mean, want to call it a government? Well, a government's just a corporation. Corporations still are big, powerful entities. It doesn't need to be some evil government in power that can hold people down or do bad things with information. It can also be corporations. And yes, corporations are collecting more data than all the governments in the world, and most likely they're collecting data all the time on you, using it for all sorts of different purposes, mostly to sell stuff to you and make more money.
And they sell that information to the government, by the way. So
it's an end around the Fourth Amendment.
Right. The government didn't do the search. The company was collecting the information, and they don't have to. There's no probable cause. They don't need a court order to collect information as a company, but the government can just go to OnStar or any corporation. Sears collects information on you. Why do you want my phone number when I buy a pack of nails? I don't know why any of these retail. I mean, I know why they do it, but
of course,
you're going to ask me for my phone number because I'm buying like $20 worth of stuff. Get lost. That's just
they don't even need your phone number,
question.
Nick. I mean, how much do you really buy with cash? Well, maybe you do. Everything's a swipe with the debit card for me, so that's an easy way for them to track me and sell my data.
Well, one of the reasons I pay for cash is because I don't like companies being able to compile the information quite as easily.
It's so easy than convenient, though. You know what else is easy? OnStar. You mentioned OnStar, and that's the story I'm talking about. But this doesn't need to be OnStar. My point in this is it's everybody collecting data, mining data, and who knows what they're going to use it for. Navigation and emergency service company OnStar is notifying its 6 million account holders that it will keep a complete accounting of the speed and location of OnStar-equipped vehicles even after drivers discontinue monthly service. OnStar began emailing customers on Monday about its update to the privacy policy, which grants OnStar the right to sell the GPS-derived data to anonymous in an anonymous format. I always have trouble with big words, Nick. Sorry, OnStar does not currently sell customer data, but it reserves the right to. The GPS might also create a treasure trove of data that could be used in criminal and civil cases. One could also imagine eager police acquiring data to issue speeding tickets. Yeah, I never thought about that. Since it is in real time, they could get it and say, well, we know you're speeding because of your OnStar device. They added a bullet point allowing them to collect data for any purposes, which essentially, that whole anonymous part, well, it just nixes that out there. Don't you love those privacy policies that you have to sign on to? It doesn't really matter because at the end, there's always a statement that says, and we can change this and do whatever we want with it.
Without notifying you.
So there's always that point in there, this is anonymous, don't worry. But then there's another bullet point down at the bottom that says, never mind about that last bullet point up there.
Yeah, it is lovely, and I mean, if you think about it, a lot of people now have smartphones. Even the old school flip phones a lot of them had GPS cards in there, and they could track you. You might as well be wearing like a monitoring, bracelet or anklet. I mean, the same as you would for house arrest. They have the ability to track you now. Now, it might just be your cell phone provider, but the government can buy all those records. So essentially, when you take your smartphone wherever you go, you might as well have a tracking device embedded on you. Not just government. Other companies can buy that information. Who knows if they're reputable? Who knows if they're actually going to protect your data? Who knows if they want to protect your data? Maybe another company wants to buy that information so it can sell it to people who are going to do all kinds of unethical things with it. We're living in a time when there's just so much information. If you're somebody who does use the technology that's available, like smartphones, like the web, like a credit card, there's just so much information out there that it exists somewhere, and somebody's collecting and compiling it. But you're tracked in ways that I don't think Orwell could have imagined that people would ever be tracked this well. Even in Orwell's 1984, you could still slip through the surveillance system. Now forget about the closed-circuit television cameras. I mean, we're living in an age where you've got not only a device that tells the government or a corporation where you are at all times, but they can backdoor into your cell phone and start listening to the scene. So basically, you've got a baby monitor on you at all times, too. I mean, does this not seem a little troubling to anybody else?
Man, it is an amazing time to be an evil dictator, Nick. Just think about.
If a Hitler or a Stalin came to power with the technologies they had today, there wouldn't have been a single Jew left in Germany or a single person that Stalin didn't like left in Russia. I mean,
I guess we'll just have to hope that technology is used for good and not for evil, because technology is not going to stop. It's moving at a quickening pace, and so we'll just have to hope.
I don't know that hoping is going to do a whole lot, but you can develop solutions to this. There are ways to.
Anyways.
There are ways that we can win this race. It's kind of a race between remaining anonymous and being tracked all the time.
Well, I'm being tracked a lot. I don't have one of those smartphone technologies, but I use my card everywhere, and I Google and all that other stuff, so I'm sure I'm being tracked everywhere. I'm not off the grid. I'm very much on it still, as are most of the people who watch the show. You're watching it on the internet, many of you. You're watching on TV, many of you. I mean, if you're getting this show, chances are you're being tracked. Anyways, and not off the grid. Anyways, tell me a little bit, Nick, about what's going on in LA and some new research about medical marijuana facilities.
They closed some medical marijuana dispensaries, which are illegal in California and in Los Angeles. But a study was released on Tuesday that showed that when hundreds of medical marijuana dispensaries closed last year in Los Angeles, crime rates actually rose in surrounding neighborhoods, challenging claims made by law enforcement agencies that the storefronts are magnets for crime. The report by the nonprofit Rand Corp reviewed crime reports from 10 days prior and the 10 days after city officials shuttered the clinics last summer after a new ordinance went into effect. The analysis revealed that crime increased about 60% within 3 blocks of a closed dispensary compared to the same parameters for those that remained open. Now, I don't know that closing medical marijuana dispensaries actually results in an increase in crime. And obviously, a 20-day sample size.
Not much.
Not much. Kind of hard to tell. One thing I can think of is that people who are getting their drugs at the dispensary might be getting it from people on the street at that point. Just 'cause, I mean, you may have what's the number of the card? I don't know. Your medical marijuana card in California, which makes it legal for you to purchase marijuana because you have a medical condition. But that doesn't mean you have a whole lot of money or a whole lot of time to get way across. I mean, LA is not a very walking-friendly city. So if they shut all the dispensaries near your house, or if you're sick, if you're a cancer patient, you might not want to go that far from home. So if they shut down the dispensaries close to your home, maybe you have to go back to the streets to get it, in practical terms. So that's, I can see how that.
It's going from the market to the black market.
Right. And frankly, I don't know that these have a huge relationship at all. The medical marijuana dispensaries have a huge relationship at all to criminality on the streets. They may just not really have that much of an effect.
I think we need more data. But anyways, we're out of time for this week. Until next week, freemindstv.com is the address. Until then, it's been Toby here with you.
And Nick.
Have a great night.